Hello guys, and today we have one of the most important topics to discuss. How likely is a military or a political palace coup in Russia? And while the international media is super preoccupied with the potential agreement between Ukraine and Russia, or the White House and Russia, in Russia people keep talking about the potential coup. And with each month of their military and economic failures, it becomes more and more realistic. And do you know why? Well, first of all, when back in 2022 millions of Russians supported the idea of the special military operation, they believed in blitzkrieg. They believed it would give them access to the Ukrainian wealth, that would strengthen their geopolitical position and reaffirm the myth of the Great Russia. And now, after 4 years of constant failures on the front lines, with war on the Russian territory now, with great economic losses, they are looking for someone to blame. And of course, they will not concentrate on their own wrong choices, they will blame Putin. That is why more and more Russian vloggers, Russian regional politicians, oligarchs start describing themselves as victims of Putin's special military operation. This is wrong. Once again, back in 2022, they all supported him and this idea. They made it real. Putin is the product of their life, but now they are prepared to blame him and potentially sacrifice him. That's interesting, and there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, Putin, with his authoritarian reign, made it impossible for any opposition to exist. The political change in the country is not real. Elections are not real, so the only solution is a coup. And that is exactly what they start talking about, literally on very different channels, on Telegram, on YouTube, in conversations, on the kitchens. And I've decided it's super important for us to consider the probability of such military coup or a political palace coup, because once again this goes well with the long-term Russian tradition. That's exactly how all of their dictators end up. There is one more reason for you to subscribe to our Anna Danilchuk community, because here we discuss important things from inside Russia which are decisive for the course of this war, and I do have some expertise as an ordinary Ukrainian, unfortunately living too close to this dying Russian empire. Subscribe, my name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and now we are going to discuss perhaps one of the most interesting topics, and I've decided to prepare for this conversation extremely seriously, and I do feel like my PhD skills are working right now because I have a whole list of things that we need to discuss. So let's begin with this context. Putin promised Russia stability, security, and respect on the geopolitical arena when he came to power. And approximately for a decade, people were fully satisfied with this kind of his rule. They sacrificed their rights and their freedoms for the sake of this illusion. And now, after 25 years of his reign, they see the consequences of his mismanagement. That's what they are talking now. Perhaps for the first time during his career, he is blamed by deputies, by oligarchs, by ordinary apolitical Russians for various failures. So they are super dissatisfied, first of all, with the state of the Russian economy. That is totally devastated, and right now I talk a lot about that on Anna from Ukraine, my main channel. Do subscribe to follow these news from Russia and the new economic front lines on their territory. Second, they clearly see military failures because, let's be realistic, all of Putin's aim that he mentioned at the beginning of the full-scale invasion failed, and now war returned back to dozens of the Russian regions. Explosions are heard in Moscow, we cancel flights, we control the skies over Russia. We destroyed their oil and gas revenues and thus their federal budget, and all of that Russians feel, even if their state TV underreports something, but They clearly see that when they cannot withdraw their money from ATMs, when they see prices, when they observe how quickly inflation grows, how many businesses are closing, even restaurants in Moscow. So, economy, military failures, and geopolitical losses. They wanted the world to respect Russia, and they see how Putin loses his influence in Middle East, in North and South America, in Africa, all because his promises to protect Maduro, to protect Assad, to protect Iran are just empty words. Russian weapons do not do the job, air defense fails, and Putin pretends that he actually did not promise anything specific. So, and Russia becomes fully dependent on China. They know it, they feel it, and trust me, there are way more signs than we read about them even on the Russian Telegram channels. So, another aspect that we rarely discuss is that Russian violence, Russian crimes, millions of Russian soldiers who did a lot of bad things in Ukraine are now a big part of their life, and we may talk about this degradation of the population and their attitudes towards life, towards, I don't know, respect, and they become very violent, very criminal, and they start accepting violence as something normal. And the moment you accept violence as something normal, you are open for more violence. And if, for example, a coup seemed like something impossible, illegal, criminal, dangerous back in 2000, now, after they know how they erase Ukrainian cities, how they loot, how they commit all of these crimes, why don't you think they can apply it back in Russia? That is already happening. The number of criminal cases opened with various Russian veterans or soldiers involved are huge. And in general, that's what they see on the news, that's what they read in the Telegram channels. They become more angry, more aggressive, and they are prepared to be violent even inside Russia, which is partially the trait of their character too. So we may say military failures, economic failures, loss of geopolitical influence, and thus this ruined myth of strong Russia. And finally, that's interesting and important, this normalization of violence. This is the background, what makes a coup possible. Another context is that Putin controls everything. FSB, GRU, police, and a lot of other secret services in Russia. Elections are not real. It's obvious he fakes them, he forges them, and people also are afraid to express their opinion. So, is there any chance that you can change Putin politically? No. So there is no way he will leave his throne by, I don't know, elections, some change, opposition coming. So no opposition, no elections, no chances for any political changes. Which brings us again that the only solution seems like a coup. And one more important thing from a cultural manager too, cultural heritage. It's a part of the Russian cultural heritage, coups. They are very common. Somehow they nurture dictators every 50 years. That's a long time tradition in that country. And also that's the way they end them. What's more interesting for you lucky people living in democracies, that a coup may seem totally impossible days before it happens, because everything is so under control, censorship, people got used to lying for decades, people are pretending to save themselves. And then when something happens, it seems totally unrealistic a week before it happens. Think about Ceausescu's fall. Just before he was executed, I think he was re-elected with 100% support a month before that. So Don't believe that people support Putin even when his oligarchs like Deripaska speak openly about the Kremlin destroying Russian businesses in thousands, destroying their businesses, destroying their banking system, leaving Russia with nothing. Thumbs up for that. So it seems like the context is pretty obvious. Also, if we look at Putin's behavior, he has always been extremely frightened of people. That's why I totally believe that he has doubles. I'm not a person who is superstitious or believes in various very doubtful things, but for dictators, you have to accept it. It's a norm to have a double. They know that people don't like them. They know that people want to change them, but do not have any chances, especially when these dictators start failing. And Russians are prepared to blame Putin. That's a solution for them. And unfortunately, I believe this may be a solution for the world, and the world will clearly say yes, because they are afraid of what can we do with millions responsible for all of this violence and war crimes. It's better to blame one person. And here I have to disagree, because I love how you quote in comments that if the country is run by a dictator, it is not only a dictator to blame. These are the words of Winston Churchill, and he is extremely right here. So we may see that Putin is panicking. There are lots of videos that they started sharing on the Russian TV right now that were canned videos, like filmed a year, 8 years ago, because he stopped appearing even on these staged events traditionally during January. They also close the highways in Russia when he travels, and not just like a couple of kilometers, but literally almost all of the capital when he's traveling. He sends his doubles on various visits to different parts of the Russian Federation because he's afraid to travel himself. And we know even about his suitcase or something. So you can imagine the level of his panic and fear. He stopped traveling to Sochi because he knows the Ukrainian drones often visit military locations there. And there are a lot of things that he demonstrates in his everyday life, like lawn tables, a network of bunkers, his inability to visit the Russian troops on the front lines, and many, many more. So he is in full panic mode. And now we come to this extremely interesting part of this video. So do share it if you like it, where we will discuss what is more likely, a political palace coup or a military coup, because right now we live in these war times and military coups are very real during this military periods. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think is more likely? Let's begin then with this political palace coup, which are very traditional for the Russian Empire, the Russian Federation, the Soviet Union. They often happen very quickly without any additional signs, silently, and everyone then pretends that everything was just as planned. We know that Putin destroys all of his opposition. He either poisons them, or as he did with Navalny most likely, or they are lucky to escape after years in prison. And, for example, one of his famous oppositioners, Khodorkovsky, who is now in London, he is a former Russian oligarch. I don't see any real Russian opposition, people who do want to change something very much inside Russia, but he is an active and known kind of oppositioner that Russia has. And he is also the leader of anti-war committee that works in London, preparing a platform, a political platform that potentially can substitute Putin if an opportunity occurs. For example, a palace coup, some protests in Russia. And this is actually wise. So Putin recently, together with FSB, charged them with terrorism and wants to neutralize them in this traditional Russian way. This is the demonstration of his fear, because previously Khodorkovsky was working abroad and not much attention was paid by the Kremlin after he escaped Russia and went out of prison. Then Lavrov disappeared from active political and diplomatic communication, and many say inside Russia One more reason to subscribe, because I read a lot of these toxic Russian sources to be able to provide you with this internal perspective, and that's important for the understanding of the situation in the country, so that you do not push Ukraine to appease the Kremlin. You actually wait and see how it collapses. So Lavrov is seen as a potential competitor. You'd be surprised to know that Lavrov, it seems to me, ranks second in popularity among the Russian politicians, and perhaps this irritates Putin a lot. So he does not like Lavrov now, and he's experienced, he's well known in Russia, and a lot of people like him. And now he is almost blamed for the national treason because he failed Russian-American negotiations, perhaps because he was not that complimentary to Trump, or I don't know. Some joke because of his bad English, but there were people inside the Russian parliament pushing for the arrest of Lavrov for something like a treason. And also Kozak, who was Putin's friend, he had high positions in the administration, and recently he resigned, and there were tons of articles inside Russia and in foreign media that Kozak was the one opposing the full-scale war, even though he was the one behind the annexation of Crimea and the first attack on Ukraine in 2014. But anyway, it felt like people are trying to whitewash Kozak, and maybe he could be the one to substitute Putin. So this is just a few options when we talk about the palace coup, the political coup. And let's switch to the military one, which may seem also very realistic. First of all, because we remember Prigozhin's march to Moscow. And when he began it in 2023, it was a total surprise for me. And I'm sure it was a total surprise for you. And 100% it was a big surprise for the Kremlin, because even their propagandists literally do not know how to comment. And they were silent for more than a day in this most decisive critical hours. Another important observation: when Prigozhin with his Wagner group traveled to Russia, region by region approaching Moscow, no one tried to stop him. No police, no military, no governors, they were observing. So it may demonstrate us that people aren't against this kind of change. I do not know why he stopped, what was the influence they had on him. But another general that was the curator of Wagner Group, the one that held negotiations with him openly, was yesterday, just a couple of days ago, shot in Moscow. Alexei, it may be that it is the Ukrainian intelligence and he is the war criminal, but it also seems very likely it may be Putin's purges, because he fears the military coup. Why? Do you know any popular Russian generals? Any people who are known on TV, who are present next to Putin? No. Even trying to militarize the population, trying to whitewash the invasion of Ukraine as the way to defend Ruski Mir, Putin does not let any military figures become popular, because he is afraid of this competition, especially in such times. And among soldiers, there are 1 million of this experienced killers. So they do everything not to make generals, not to make military leaders popular. And even the promise to encourage Russian soldiers to participate in various political parties, local councils, totally disappeared. When they apply for such positions, they usually get denials. And Putin is a classical, like, mafia type person that is obsessed with his security, but he also understands that this GRU, FSB, military generals, they do have a lot of skills. They know all of his failures more than we do. And they can use it against him. They know his fears, they know his weaknesses. So this seems like a very big threat for his regime. Plus, remember that the soldiers right now are very dissatisfied. They stopped earning the money they were promised because of the crisis in the Russian economy. Their salaries, the one that they still get, are also losing their value because of the inflation. They do not get any promised things like with banks, with social security and so on. They keep losing these things because, once again, not enough money in the federal and regional budget to fulfill these promises. They see the level of violence towards them because there are tons of criminal cases when these soldiers, veterans, return back to their desperate, miserable cities and lives, and they are robbed by locals who consider them rich after they looted something in Ukraine. So the situation is very bad. Plus, they do not see the aim of this war now. They see that they don't get what they were promised, that there is no real aim, and Ukraine grows stronger, nothing changes. They see what happens to the territories that they really slowly occupy, sacrificing like 100,000 persons for 1 square kilometer, and these are ashes. This is nothing. And Russian vloggers, by the way, are super worried that why do we need this destroyed part if that's nothing, and Ukraine does not want us, and we will never get any new territories. That's why Putin pressures for this surrender of Donbass, which will never happen, and so on. So soldiers can actually support a military coup, or anyone bright, interesting, talking directly to them, appearing on the arena. Putin does not address them. They keep lying. They keep pretending that, everything is fine in the Russian economy. But they see how their payments are getting smaller. They see that right now Ukraine neutralizes more soldiers than they are able to mobilize during a month. And a lot of things. And the Kremlin does not hear them. The Kremlin keeps pretending that everything is fine when millions witness the collapse of the Russian military, of the Russian economy, and even of the myth of the Great Russia. This is really good, and this gives a lot of space for such potential things to happen. And another important observation with coups, it is always the closest people who end such dictators. So let me know in the comments below, what do you consider more likely, a military or a political coup, and who could potentially be the leader of such a coup? And do you think it's realistic? Honestly, I do think it is one of the most likely scenarios. Now that Putin destroyed the Russian Federation from inside, millions cheered for that, not realizing the potential consequences, and now they are ready to find this scapegoat. Is that the right term? And Putin seems like a perfect person for that. Perfect criminal. I cannot use the word person with him. So let me know your thoughts in comments. I always read them, and subscribe, share these videos to spread the truth. Also follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, and Substack. Now a weekly newsletter is available for those who follow me. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channels. Check our merch shop, new spring Valentine collection, and a good way to remind the world about our war and the need to defeat Russia. Thank you once again. United we stand. Slava Ukraini!